What's up? Do authors owe it to us to finish their series? Find out my answer after the jump. As readers, we fall in love with the worlds and characters that authors create. We fall in love with them enough and become invested enough that we can often audibly cheer or cry or feel depressed about fictional characters in novels, right? That's what readers are. We become attached. So it may feel sort of tragic when characters and plot lines and worlds that we have become so invested in just suddenly stop without any conclusion. And we think we may never know the conclusion and the endings for these characters and plot lines. And in 2021, the two authors I think most of when we talk about this issue is George R.R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss, the authors and creators of the Game of Thrones and Kingkiller's Chronicles, respectively. It's interesting because actually 2021 marks both of those authors' 10-year anniversary from when they last released their last book in the series. So 2011 is when the two most recent books in both of those series were released. And after about a decade, people have started to become nervous that these series will never be finished. And I'm not really a part of the Game of Thrones fandom, but I am a part of the Kingkiller's Chronicles fandom. I like those books a lot. And so I remember distinctly that Doors of Stone was supposed to be released in August of 2015. Now, the distress that's caused in these fandoms have led to different reactions. Some people take it pretty stoically, are disappointed, and just hope it comes out. But it can turn some fans into anger and sadness and depression about why aren't these authors giving us their books? And it often turns into the question of, do these authors owe us their books? They owe us. We're the ones who are paying them to do this. We have supported them. We have given them our money, making them able to make authordom a living. Don't they owe it to us to finish that series and give us what we paid for? Now, before I answer those questions, we have to first recognize that this issue I'm talking about is actually a pretty modern issue. Even though there have been readers from the dawn of time, there are two particular issues that make this whole not finishing a series more relevant to today's time. The first issue being that printing a book used to take a lot longer than it takes now. The first issue is that printing used to take a lot more time than it does today. The first printing press wasn't invented until the 1400s by Johannes Gutenberg. I'm sure many of us have heard that name. We've heard of the Gutenberg press. That automated book printing and made several pages able to be printed at once. But despite that, printing a book was still a very long process. It wasn't really until the early 1900s that they really mechanized that process and they really improved it. And even though they did improve it, there were still things that they just couldn't seem to take less time, like actually compiling the book and putting each piece in its proper place. It wasn't until the very late 20th century that digital printing became a thing. And now with digital printing and where it's become, we can have self-published authors get Amazon to print their book on demand. So now the compiling part of a book is the least worrisome part of the process. It probably takes the least amount of time of the process. But that wasn't until extremely recently, like the 1990s. So perhaps back in the day, readers were used to being a little bit more patient for their books because they knew it was a longer process. When I was doing a lot of research for this video about people who thought authors never finished their series and kind of what that did, some people mentioned J.R.R. Tolkien. They talked about how The Hobbit was released in 1937 and the first novel of The Lord of the Rings wasn't released until 1954. That is an impressive 17-year gap. Now, this doesn't necessarily quite hold up in my opinion because I feel like The Hobbit was a pretty self-contained story. But 17 years is a long time if people really thought this story was going to continue. And especially because The Lord of the Rings were published very close together, considering that J.R.R. Tolkien considered them to be one book. They were all released a few months apart. But again, I wonder if expectations might be a lot lower because of that time. Additionally, there was like this really trivial thing going on called World War II between both of those book releases, but who's paying attention to little details like that? Now, the second huge factor that has changed the landscape is the internet. The advent of the internet that everybody can use, the advent of Reddit forums and multiple publications that just focus on fantasy authors and fantasy publications. Back in the day, we didn't have a way to get together this many fans. You know, if you were annoyed that a book wasn't coming out, you were probably just talking to your family. Maybe if you were lucky, you had friends interested in it, or a local fan group, or maybe a county-wide fan group or whatever, but there wasn't really a way to get together with fans from all over the country or even worldwide like there is now at the click of a button. We probably didn't have as much dedicated news to just fantasy. There weren't as many forums to find this out. Authors weren't live streaming their updates. We as fans now have so much more connection not only to each other, but to the authors themselves. And this is where I think it changes our landscape. Both of these issues came to a head in the late 20th century and are fully developed now as we're beginning in the 21st century. Fans have more access to their authors more than ever and to each other to complain or anticipate or talk about when they want a book to release or what they expect to see from those books. Now, the reason I bring these two things up when we talk about authors owing us their work is that there's just not a lot of historical context I can look at. I can't really look into the past about other book series and what people felt about them because this is just kind of a new thing. This is a thing that didn't have a voice until this recent technology. Now, arguments I've seen saying that authors do owe us their work usually center around money. It usually centers around the fact that fans paying for the author's works is what's making them successful. Now, just in case you didn't know, if we're talking about a traditionally published author, they'll usually get some sort of advance from a publisher to write their novel, and then anything they make after that are royalties from people buying their book. Usually about 10% on a hardback, 7.5% on a paperback, and so on for audiobooks and ebooks and other methods of obtaining books. So you can really say like, hey, if we're talking about Martin and Rothfuss, your net worth is because of us. Now, Martin's is a little different because he has an astronomical net worth, mostly I think because of the Game of Thrones TV show. I personally think TV makes way more money than books, so I'm just gonna make that assumption. But Rothfuss's net worth isn't anything to laugh at, and I think fans like to point like, hey, we did that. We've supported you as an author and as this lifestyle, and don't you owe us to finish that series? Other arguments center around honesty. Didn't you promise your readers a trilogy or promise them a 7-book series? And don't they deserve that if you promised that you would deliver on it and to be honest about it? So here's my answer. Authors do owe us something, but it isn't their work. They don't owe us their work. I disagree with the above arguments. I don't think authors owe us anything when it comes to their work, and I'm going to tell you why in the following points. Number 1, investing in an author is just like any other investment. When you make an investment in something, it is not a promise that that will come to pass. You invest in something because you believe in it and you believe that your investment will pay off. I believe buying a book from an author is kind of like a Kickstarter campaign. Kickstarter is very clear that when you invest in something, you may never see the product and you will not get your money back, even if you don't see the product. How is investing in an author any different? We're buying their work because we believe in it, we love it, we think it's very good, and we're supporting them. But it doesn't mean that that investment will necessarily pay out. It doesn't mean that they will necessarily finish the series. If authors owe anyone their series, it's probably their publishers who actually gave them an advance to do a job. But we didn't do that. We didn't have a contract like the publisher did. We invested in their work because we believed in it. Number 2, there's no template for art. If everyone could write a book, more people would do it. Writing a book that's complex and has a lot of world building and is a good book is difficult work. And when we're talking about the people we usually talk about in this, fans are invested in their work because they had good work. It took a long time. Now, I'm not a creative myself, but several of my very close friends are very creative people. And one thing I've noticed about art and creativity is that it's not something that can really be scheduled. Inspiration matters a lot. Your mood, your feelings, what's going on in the world. It doesn't always strike when you want it to. And so I think art is something that's harder to force. It's harder to just sit down. You can't just be like a machine and sit and go, I'm gonna work on this today and it's gonna work. Number 3, we may not know what's going on in an author's personal life, and we don't deserve to know. As much as we like to feel like we know authors and they're our friends because of the internet and we get to communicate with them so much more readily, the fact is they're not. We don't know them personally, and we don't know if something's going on in their lives that's making it harder for them to write. And honestly, we don't deserve to know. It's okay that things are private. They don't necessarily have to tell us. And I think the best example of this comes from this awesome interview with Brandon Sanderson.
You can totally have found me at certain points ranting with my friends about how the Wheel of Time wasn't done yet. In fact, my friend Micah, who if you read the Mistborn books, Captain Nemo is where Micah's cameo in the Mistborn books. He and I together had a thing where anytime someone mentioned Robert Jordan's name, kind of embarrassed to admit this, he would raise his fist and we would both go, "Damn him!" because the series wasn't done yet. That became a lot less fun when we found out that Robert Jordan was sick with a degenerative blood disease. And we stopped doing that around that time.
What a good example. Yeah, it became a lot less funny when they found out that Jordan was dying. And I understand that those examples might not always be the reason, and some people just don't want to write. But it is a good example of we just don't always know what's going on. So if I don't think authors owe us their books, what do I think they owe us? I think they owe us honesty and kindness. Both are easy, both are free, both don't take any time to give to their fans. Truthfully, like I said before, I'm not actually in the Game of Thrones fandom, so I apologize if I'm getting something wrong here, but everything I've heard about Martin says that he's kind of given honesty and kindness to his fans. He's talked about his struggles with writing the other books now that the TV show is over. He's talked about not being sure when they're going to come out, and it seems like he's been very forthcoming about that. And I feel like that has probably comforted the fans in some way, because at least he's not pretending something that's not. Like I said, I don't really know, but that's the impression that I have gotten from him. That case has not been how I felt with Rothfuss. There was a whole controversy about how he told everyone that he was working on it, and it was going to come out soon. And then finally, I think it was either his publisher or his editor, I can't remember, came out and was like, I have not seen a single page of this novel. And that was years ago, and still nothing. And then I watched one of his lives where he was so rude to fans. It just blew me out of the water. And I understand. I understand how frustrating it must be if you know you should be working on something, you're not working on that something, and people are asking you daily, are you working on that something? I get it. That would drive me crazy. But if he had just come out and honestly said something like, I'm not working on it, I'm having a hard time working on it, I'm going through a lot of stuff right now, I ask you not to ask me about it, I promise I'll update you when there's an update. What I wonder if he had just been upfront at first, if fans would have been nicer about it. I don't know, it really turned me off when I saw him being so rude to his fans, and it made me just feel like, okay, if it comes out, it comes out, but I'm not following this circus anymore. So ultimately, in the end, I don't think authors owe us their stories. I don't think they owe us their books, but I do think they owe us honesty and kindness because it's free and it's easy. So I want to know what you think about this issue. Are you in the camp that, hey, these authors owe it to us to finish these series? Or do you feel like me that they don't really owe us anything? I'm really interested in your comments. Please leave them below. And as always, if you like this video and want to see more, please support me by subscribing. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.